tonight, I have a chance to speak to you about one of my favorite topics, and that is Israel and what's going on in Israel. Now, I've been on numerous calls on the last few days. Um, I've been on numerous calls the last few days uh, because I'm serving on a variety of different Israel committees. I'm on the CCAR Israel committee, which is the Reform Rabbis committee on Israel, and the Union of the Reform Rabbis. I'm on the URJ Israel committee, which is the movement's Israel committee, and I'm on the APAC National Council. So I've had some pretty high level briefings over the last few days and been able to hear what's going on from politicians in Israel and here, as well as some thinkers in the reform movement and some of the reform rabbis. So I'm going to try to distill what I've learned over the last few days and what I've been following to all of you. I also want to let you know, I don't know if you have Uverse. I don't know if you have Uverse. I have Uverse. You may have Comcast or DirecTV or whatever. But there's a channel that Uverse has now picked up, and I believe Comcast picked it up too, called I-24. If you have Uverse, it's channel 1223. And basically what it is it's Israel news 24 hours a day in English, although they do have a couple of shows in Spanish and French. It's a wonderful channel. I've been following it online for a few years, but it's now our cable package has picked it up. So I've been able to watch the Israeli news in English every night, and they have a lot of other great shows too. So you might want to check that out. Okay, so it is you couldn't make it up. If someone was going to try to make up a storyline for what's going on in Israel, if you would try to say what's happening today in Israel, it would be so far-fetched that nobody would believe you. And there's so many things going on. It's just not believable. I mean, it would be like if right now, while the coronavirus quarantine was going on, that in addition to that, the Watergate scandal was happening, Vietnam was happening, and the stock market crash of the 30s. If all of that was going on at one time, that's a little bit what it would be like. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, COVID-19 obviously is a shocker, and it has turned Israel upside down, although they're starting to get back to normal. And it's taken a massive hit to their economy. And a lot of people are losing their jobs. It's hard to get a sense from here how vast the problem is. But the people that I know in Israel, the people that I talk to, are generally people in the tourism industry. And tourism is I think the fourth largest sector of the Israeli economy, and it has totally grinded to a halt. So a lot of restaurants, all the hotels, lots of shops, everybody, they have nothing to do. So that's one. The economy's taken a massive hit. Number two, for the first time in Israel's history, the sitting prime minister. I mean, Israelis have politicians in the courthouse all the time, but this is for the first time in Israel's history, a sitting prime minister has begun a criminal trial and is being held in 3 cases of corruption, and that trial started just a few days ago. So if it wasn't enough that you had the COVID-19, you also have the first ever trial of the prime minister, the same week that a new government, after essentially a political crisis of 3 elections to try and figure out who the new government is going to be, a new government is now starting while all this is happening. And by the way, this is a kind of a newsflash. You're not going to hear this anywhere, but a lot of the Arab countries still don't like Israel. They still don't like Israel. And today, by the way, I'm being told that if you want to watch Israel news and you have I-24 News and you have Comcast, it's channel 1118, which should be easy to remember. 1118. And if you have Uverse like I do, it's 1223, and it's really good. It's really, really good. It's pretty balanced too. It's pretty balanced. Okay, so you have all of that. You have the trial. You have COVID-19. And at the exact same time, in addition to all of this, as if that wasn't enough, now that Netanyahu is beginning his new government, it's the weirdest government he's ever had because he's not the only prime minister. There's now a new chair called the alternate prime minister, which means that Benny Gantz has an office right down the hall from his prime minister's office, and he can veto pretty much anything. Not to mention, this is the most bizarre and ridiculous arrangement of political parties in Israel's history. Consider this: the party that founded Israel, the Labor Party, the party of David Ben-Gurion, the party of Golda Meir, the party of Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres, pretty much doesn't even exist anymore. There is no left wing in Israel. There's a centrist wing, or there's a centrist party that was headed for the last 8 years pretty much by Yair Lapid, who's proven to be a candidate who's not able to really do anything. He's never been able to make a serious run at prime minister. And now the one time that he was able to maybe be prime minister, Benny Gantz comes along and takes that position from him and moves up to number one in Yair Lapid's own party. It's unheard of. The guy started his own party, became number one in his party, ran for prime minister in his own party. Benny Gantz enters his party the first time in the history of his political career. He was a soldier his whole life, including the chief of staff of the Israeli army. And Yair Lapid has to cede the number one seat to him because people believe that Benny Gantz can become prime minister and Yair Lapid can never become prime minister. Then Benny Gantz does become prime minister and has to split it with his most hated rival, Bibi Netanyahu. He does that. And the guy who got him there, Yair Lapid, Benny Gantz splits, leaves Yair Lapid, is no longer part of Yair Lapid's party, and joins Bibi Netanyahu's government. Now, why would he do that? He said he would never join Bibi Netanyahu's government. He hates Bibi Netanyahu. So how could Benny Gantz now have an office right next to Bibi Netanyahu? Well, because he ran against him in the first election and it didn't go very well. Actually went very well, but not well enough. So he ran against him in the second election. And like I said in the second election, the day before it happened, the second election, the result of the second election will be a great indication of what's going to happen in the third election. And so they went to a third election. And in the same thing happened all three times. But what did Benny Gantz realize if they went to a fourth election? Benny Gantz had three choices. His first choice was he could make his own government and he could be prime minister. But the only way he could make a coalition would be to join forces with the Joint List, the Arab Party, which he promised he wouldn't do. That was choice number one, which he said he couldn't do and he didn't do. The second choice was to sit with Netanyahu and make a deal with him. And the third choice was to go to another election. So he realized that if it went to another election, the polls were showing that he would be trounced. If he didn't take this third election opportunity to make a deal with Bibi or to become prime minister himself, if it went to a third election, the right-wing parties would overwhelm him. And so he took the only choice left to do, which was to make a deal with Netanyahu. And so that's what we have now. If in making that deal with Netanyahu, he basically had to jettison from all of the people who got him there. And so now his party, blue and white, has split. And the party that originally joined them, Yair Lapid's party, which was called Yesh Atid, which means in Hebrew there is a future, which became blue and white, has now gone back to becoming Yesh Atid again. So think about what you have now. You have the largest government in Israel's history, 53 ministers, which is an absurd amount of ministers and a ridiculous amount of salary. It's the most bloated government in Israel's history. But what Netanyahu has said is it's ridiculously expensive to have a government like this, but it's cheaper than going to a fourth election. So in making a government like this, a unity government that included Benny Gantz and now has a rotation in which Netanyahu will be the prime minister for the next 18 months, and then Benny Gantz will be the prime minister for 18 months after that, the only way to do that was to have this big bloated government with 53 ministers. Now, if you wanted to join this coalition, if you're another party, here's your choices. If you join the coalition, you're going to get a portfolio. Your leader is going to be the minister of something, and you'll get something that you want. If you don't join it, you get nothing. And you go into the opposition, which is where Yair Lapid is, and Yair Lapid is the new head of the opposition. What's fascinating is, who is he sitting with in the opposition? He's sitting with all the people who couldn't make a deal with Netanyahu. The irony is, the people in the opposition are from the right, the left, and the center, and they have nothing in common. The only thing they have in common is they can't get along with Netanyahu, and they couldn't make a deal with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu didn't need them because he now had all of Benny Gantz's votes. So if you think about the opposition, it's the most insane thing in history. You have Ayelet Shaked, who was the justice minister. You have Naftali Bennett, who was the previous minister of defense, who are two of the most right-wing people in all. They're right of Netanyahu. Their party is called Yamina, which means right. They couldn't be further to the right. They're in favor of annexation. And who are they sitting with in the opposition? The Arabs. They hate each other. And now they're sitting together. So anything that Bibi does that the Arabs don't like, that's right wing, the Arabs won't find anyone even in their own opposition to vote with them, because those right-wing parties are right of Netanyahu, and they're going to support what he does. So Netanyahu is in an amazing position politically, because even the opposition is going to agree with him on issues vis-a-vis the Arabs, the Palestinians, and the other Arab countries, and that really hasn't happened in Israel's history. So Bibi has two things going for him and one thing against him. The two things that he has going for him are, one, he's prime minister for the next 18 months. Two, he's got a massive government to get done what he wants to get done. I'd say three things. And three, he's got President Trump, who lets him do whatever he wants. And what's the bad news about that? The bad news for Bibi is he doesn't know how much longer he's going to have Trump. And two is he's only prime minister himself for 18 months. So what is he thinking about in the next 18 months? One, he's thinking about hopefully Trump will be reelected, because he has an amazing relationship with Trump. And Bibi really doesn't care what liberal Jews in America think on that issue. And two, he's got 18 months to figure out how to screw Benny Gantz out of his portion of the 18 months rotation. So he's got to come up with some idea in 18 months how to get rid of Benny Gantz so that he can stay prime minister. Now, as if that wasn't enough, there's one more issue that trumps all of that. No pun intended. And what is that? Annexation. The Trump peace plan, called the deal of the century, permits and really provides for an opportunity for the Israeli government to annex the West Bank, at least 30% more of the West Bank. And this is a very fascinating issue. What's the deal with annexation, and why is Netanyahu in favor of it? One of the things that I learned today on a call that I was on, and I was listening to some very smart people in Israel talk about this, they made a very interesting point. Why is Bibi interested in annexation now? If you think about annexation, it doesn't give Israel much other than Suris in the international arena. Why do I say that? Because a lot of the areas that Israel's looking to annex are already Israeli. When you look at the lands where is of the West Bank that Israel's looking to annex, when you talk about cities like Ma'ale Adumim and different fingers that point off of Jerusalem, these are Israeli settlements that everyone agrees have become facts on the ground Israeli territory. What I mean by that is they're in the contentious West Bank that the Arabs want, that the Palestinians want as part of their next state. But the Israelis have so many Israelis living there and have built up cities. Their cities have sports teams in the Israeli leagues. These are real cities. And they're de facto part of Israel. So to add all of these areas that are already de facto Israel, what's the sense in annexing these areas? Well, there's two reasons. First of all, and before I tell you these two reasons, I'll tell you that in Israel, most people don't really care about annexation. This is not on the top of their agenda right now. The Palestinians aren't really on the top of Israel's agenda right now. There are three things that are way more important to Israelis right now than the conflict with the Palestinians, because this is not a time of violence. What are the three things that are more important to Israelis right now? One, the coronavirus. Two, Iran. And three, the economy. And any one of those three things is affecting Israeli life a much greater deal than the Arab-Israeli conflict, because there hasn't been hardly any terrorism lately. And a couple things about Bibi Netanyahu. One is Israelis believe that he's handling all three of these things very well, including Israelis giving him very, very high marks for his handling of the coronavirus. Less than 300 Israelis died of the coronavirus, which is a sort of a minor miracle, especially considering a lot of the Orthodox areas were ignoring all of the instructions on not congregating. So Israel has done a remarkable job dealing with the coronavirus, and in fact, other countries around the world have been looking to Israel to learn about how they've been so successful. Now, let me just conclude with a couple words about Bibi Netanyahu, and then if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. First of all of this, the guy must have like ice water in his veins. He's doing all of this while Iran is threatening to blow Israel up and wipe it off the map. And oh, by the way, he's on trial and could end up in jail, and that doesn't seem to bother him. The guy's not really incredible. So he could end up in jail. I don't think he will, but he certainly could end up guilty. I mean, after all, he was indicted by the attorney general, who would not have indicted him if there wasn't a really good case, and he may end up just being forced out of the scene. Now, if you're Bibi Netanyahu, and I think this is where the whole crux of the issue comes, Donald Trump, whether he did it on purpose or not, has given Netanyahu a saving grace. And what Netanyahu is probably thinking about right now is his legacy. So annexation, it doesn't really do much. Israelis don't really even care that much, because most of those lands are Jews living there anyway. The right-wing parties love it for one reason. It essentially will make a two-state solution almost impossible. And they see it as the death of the two-state solution. So the right-wing parties see that there's a lot to gain from it. What Netanyahu sees is that for his legacy, instead of going down as the guy who was indicted, he'll go down as the guy who brought the West Bank under Israeli control. And the only way he was able to do that is because Donald Trump made it possible with the deal of the century, and Donald Trump is willing to protect him diplomatically in the international arena. So What's very interesting now is before the American election in November, if Netanyahu sees that his trial is going badly, he may move for annexation and get away with it because Trump will give him diplomatic cover. On the other hand, if he is not, if his trial doesn't look like it's going badly, and Trump doesn't look like he's going to win the next election, Netanyahu will probably be a lot more hesitant to pull for annexation because President Biden has already said he's against it, and there's a very strong chance that if he does it, a Biden administration will not recognize it. So to look at Israel now, you've got a prime minister on trial, you've got the worst pandemic in 100 years, you've got a nuclear threat on your northern border, you've got annexation in the wings, and you've got an American election upcoming. Other than that, it's a slow news day in Israel. So